What is the future of research-led innovation? Today, we'll be talking about that ahead of the Introduce conference. Hey, I'm Chris Link. I'm CEO and co-founder of Technically, the news organization for community professionals and entrepreneurs. Today, ahead of our Introduce conference on Thursday, May 12th, we're having conversations around building better companies. That includes where they get built. We'll be talking about research-led innovation, how research parks and research might change in the rise of remote work and distributed workforces. To do that, I am joined by two vets of the Penn Center for Innovation. I have John Swartley and Bhavana Mohanraj. Thanks so much for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us.
I appreciate it. So let's start with PCI. You guys are housed at University of Pennsylvania, but there's some nuance to how you guys approach. We technically report on PCI and programs and other obviously institutions, but we're going to use you and understand you guys, how you've watched innovation change. Start with the basics. How does the Penn Center for Innovation pop up? Why is innovation something that a research university considers a necessity of this day and age?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. The term innovation is used a lot, and it's kind of describe an ever increasing, ever growing kind of scope of different types of activities. It's probably useful to note that we weren't always the Penn Center for Innovation. In fact, what we started out as was something probably a little bit more traditional in the academic technology commercialization industry. We were the Center for Technology Transfer, which is, you can even see it in the name. It's a narrower concept. It's about the traditional tech transfer model is patenting and licensing of inventions made at universities. And so I think that's a good lead-in to some of the reasons why we shifted to this Center for Innovation model and relied more on innovation than just transfer. Technology transfer is more of a transactional word, if you will. Here's my technology, take a license to it. The handoff is complete. Our relationship is over. Versus, innovation. True innovation is a collaborative, partnered activity, and that was really what we focused on. The Center for Innovation is much more about making robust connections between, the innovators at the university and the translator innovators in the private sector. And so we think of innovation in particular as a very operative, very active concept, and our organization is devoted towards helping to nurture and sponsor innovation in all kinds of forms. And Bhavana, my colleague Bhavana, who's joined me today, focuses on the venture creation aspect of the active innovation model and can speak to that. But I think the big interest here is innovation is a contact sport. It's a partnership. It's a very active thing, and that's what we focus on. We want to get our hands and feet in dirty and directly involved in convening these activities.
Bhavana, I feel natural. Like you represent an interesting continuation of this pipeline. You're on the PCI venture side.
Yes, and so it's been really exciting to be able to work with the faculty, the clinicians, and researchers at Penn who are creating new things in their lab, in their research spaces, and want to now see how to translate this into a commercial and a viable business. And that's where our group steps in, is we can help our faculty do that in a variety of ways. And we actually help our community do that through our residents here at Pennovation Works within the Pennovation Center. And so it's been, it's a wonderful resource here where we can actually support entrepreneurs who are following their dreams and build a community around them to provide that support.
Let's give me an example. Can we talk about a real case study? Give me the life cycle of something that goes from, lab-based invention or research or faculty-based work that then gets commercialized, and what's, just give me a snapshot of how that travels.
Bhavana, why don't you do a focus on a company, and I'll talk about an alliance relationship.
Sure. So we are fortunate to work with a variety of companies here. And so the example I'll give you is a robotics company in our portfolio called Exyn. They're a company that's founded on technology based out of Vijay Kumar's lab at Penn, looking at automation and drones and robotics and how that all merges together to create a product that's really desirable across a number of different commercial entities. And so they were spun out of Penn. They're supported by our team. And now they have a facility and space over on Washington Ave where they are continuing to grow their team. I think they've maybe tripled in size over the last several years. And it's just been great to see that type of growth and that type of talent within Philadelphia staying here to be able to support these startups.
So I'll give you one other example, and it has to do with our alliance building focus as part of our Center for Innovation. A lot of the technologies that emerge from the university are fall into the life sciences sector, and many of those are drugs or drug-like molecules, and they need to be developed from the basic research bench all the way through human clinical trials, and that process is anyone who's looked at that industry knows that it's incredibly expensive. It takes many years, and there's lots of moving parts and different steps to take a very embryonic observation all the way through to an approved medicine, and that process is in many ways, and I think I'll use the cell and gene therapy industry, which we've really been in the forefront of that for multiple decades now. In order to take a technology like that through all of those stages of development, you really need to have a hand in glove type of relationship between the early innovators and the technology translators. And we really emphasize, and this is what kind of got us into the innovation space to begin with. We're emphasizing the importance of this joint development relationship that we form between our innovators and private sector partners. And when you have that partnership and that sort of, as I said, kind of dovetailed relationship, you can really. It's less about the specifics of kind of the deal, and more about what can we do together to take this product forward. And that turns out to be an incredibly effective way to take especially life science commercial opportunities forward.
What I hear when you guys are talking about that is the old innovation ecosystem metaphor that in the last 20 years has really become ubiquitous, and the metaphor is effective. It's one reason why it has become so commonplace. The idea that it takes many different sized species to create this environment, and there's really great and established research in how influential universities are typically around research and invention and innovation communities forming. This is quite popular right now to think about it on the software and digital space, but PCI, you guys are in lots of different forms of innovation because it obviously speaks to a wide range of innovation. This has always been really tied to place. We do like lots of coverage about how those random serendipitous bumps in physical locations lead to small and big surprises. There's lots of great, interesting research on how patents almost are disproportionately made up of people who have lab space near each other. There's like all kinds of interesting, fun stuff. Last couple of years have been a really interesting challenge to that. There's been a real uptick in research and patents happening with people who are in different geographies because suddenly everything was happening remotely. So it suddenly seemed like, well, why do I only work with someone near to me? I don't need to. Super curious. Do you guys think we rubber band back and we will return to place will be where we get our work together, or has something shifted for the long term And I guess I'm mostly just asking, what's the future of innovation ecosystems? Will they still be very place-based, or are at the beginning of the end of that place-based understanding?
But I think it actually depends a lot on the sector.
Mm.
Depending on what pundit you talk to, the initial idea or the concept is in practice is really a pretty small percentage of what ultimately becomes a successful business or a marketable product. But I will emphasize that it's that genius spark, that genius idea, that incredible breakthrough that provides. It may only be a part of the process, but it's like it's kind of like a nuclear reactor. It provides, once that gets going, ideally it provides the energy to bring in the other elements, and it can be quite complex. And Bhavana I'm sure will speak to that. All of the different things that you have to do to form a business and get it in front of managers, investors. But I think in terms of place, because you asked about place, I think it really does depend on in sort of in this world, in the sector, when it's a highly technical process that is very difficult, very difficult to port, where you need to have direct hands-on types of instruction until the procedures become mainstream. I in my world, that drives kind of co-nucleation and clustering, and I don't see that going away in a lot of the sectors that are important to us. There are others that are kind of less hands-on that you could probably argue are a little more malleable with a kind of a global type of access model. But I don't see them going away in the immediate future, at least in some of the key sectors. But as I said, Bhavana actually forms these entities and knows the whole process that's required to do this. And it is, I don't know, jokingly say it takes a village. It really does take. And I probably just stole some of your lines, so I apologize, Bhavana.
No, I completely agree, John, that so the pandemic forced us to go virtual for so long and to start to build relationships in that way. And it really gave us access to, I think, resources that we might not have been able to access before in terms of our investors and partners that our companies work with. But I think at the core of it, there's still this need to be in person and to build relationships and trust and do that work in person. As John said, it is sector dependent, but in life sciences, you need people to be able to collaborate and communicate in person and look at data and results and plan together. And I think it's so much more effective sometimes than being on Zoom and having these calls remotely, because that innovation and that creativity isn't necessarily always captured on the screen. It's in the brainstorming sessions where you're putting up ideas on the wall and you're having that lively debate and discussion around a topic. And I think what's great about where we live and work, which is at the Pennovation Works campus, which is so close in proximity to the Penn, is that we have that sort of cross-pollination of innovators and of researchers and of the community that's willing to be there in person. And all of us are really working towards building these companies and making them as successful as possible.
In these last 20 years of popularizing this idea of innovation ecosystem, we just happen to be in an era of digital transformation. So a lot of the media coverage is very much aligned toward software and communications technologies. But the innovation ecosystem concept definitely always involved, particularly like in the East Coast, particularly in places like Philadelphia and Baltimore, so heavily influenced by the life sciences and biomedical work, biopharmaceutical and the like. Do you think we'll go into an era where sciences then are even more crucial because some of the commercialized or web-based technologies are increasingly heavily remote companies? We're reporting a lot on how some of those web-enabled or software companies are the first to kind of go fully remote, and the companies we cover in and around robotics, hard tech, sciences they are the least likely to be going remote. Does science come into the fore and lead innovation ecosystem conversations moving forward?
That's it. I'm hearkening back to the comment you made about, an association between, sort of patent frequency and, population density or research
Right.
institution density. I haven't studied that, but it does make some intuitive sense to me, having been sort of in this world for longer than I'm going to admit. But I think that what is true, at least, from my experience, invention and innovation, kind of says it in its name. It's discovering something new, but rarely, if ever, do you see something new that's not an iteration on something else. And I think there's a truth there in terms of clustering or concentration. And maybe why you see that is if you have co-localization of inventive people, or innovative companies and people. I think there probably is a synergy that emerges from that, and it does have some relevance to geography. I think you can emulate some of that through electronic means, but probably not all of it. Especially as Bhavana was saying, in certain sectors, you really need to have the same folks sort of in the same neighborhood, maybe not even interacting on the exact idea per se, but it's those sort of that Brownian motion, random interaction of folks. It's the hallway conversations. We really, I mean, I can't throw statistics at you because I don't know them, but my sense is that's
that hasn't
important.
stopped a lot of people, John, but I respect that.
My sense is that is important, and I think will continue.
Yeah, I mean, it inarguably has been important. I think the moment we are in is wondering, did something just shift under our feet and we don't realize it yet? I think that's the bit that we technically are really obsessed with, because there's another way to push us forward here in our last couple minutes. I think when I was hearing you, John, what was coming to my mind is one way to think about this question of whether you think the agglomeration effects. This is like mid 20th century concept that a lot of late economic development strategies been built around, this idea that with density comes greater invention, with greater invention comes greater productivity gains, economic growth, and it becomes very flywheel. And this is why we talk about the need for lowering housing costs, because we want to keep piling people into density. These are all these interwoven concepts that come together in big, massive policymaking that, when it makes sense. And we are simultaneously hearing and reporting on very different cities, towns, rural regions that are arguing now's the time for remote work. Come out here and you can distribute out.
Right.
And there's like interesting concept of, does that impact our productivity as a country? Will that slow economic gains? Will we look back and say that hurt, or will we say it just shifted? And I think when I was hearing you, John, what came to my mind is, to decide whether that matters or not it's like this Rorschach test of, are you betting that it requires a coffee meeting or beer or a whiteboard to do this work, or is that overdone and oversold and you can just do it over Zoom? And that, like, to you guys, I wonder, it's will the research clusters endure? Will we keep seeing 50 years from now, 30 years from now, whatever time you want, do we still see, yes, it matters that Penn is in University City in Philadelphia, and these other universities are in these other hubs around the country, and we still see density happening? Or does that leak out? Do you guys have your bets?
I actually think it will. This might sound a little Adam Smithy, but and maybe this is my more quantitative response. It's that these companies, and Bhavana can probably tell you exactly how many. Most of the companies that we start stay local. They don't have to stay local. We don't mandate it. We don't. It's not a forced provision in any of our contracts. But most of them, 90% plus, I would guess, stay local. And I think there's a pretty compelling reason for that. And I think it has to do. It's more than coffee. it's more than a whiteboard. I think, especially the types of highly technical companies that we tend to sponsor, you need to have that direct hands-on contact with the inventors, developers, and especially if you're going to co-develop, through the early stages, it's much better to be close and to be able to draw upon additional resources. And that's been the really, I mean, as I said, investors could take, or CEOs could take these companies anywhere, but the more that they kind of co-locate here, it's actually kind of a virtuous cycle. The more of them that decide to be here, they can draw upon each other's resources. I think it kind of builds on itself. Certainly our observation has been there is definitely a strength to the geography, and having Penn as a kind of resource in the middle of all that. But I should let Bhavana comment on that, because that's directly in her world.
Yeah, Bhavana, what's your bet? Are we still have these research clusters?
I absolutely think these research clusters will endure. I think what you see, especially in these early stage companies, is this need, as John pointed out, to be able to talk with the founders, the inventors, and be able to do deep dives into how do we bring this out of, let's say, the lab and into the product development cycle. And those conversations often are going back and forth all the time, and being able to go in person and be able to problem solve in person is really important. And I think then what you have is a huge pool of talent within the Philadelphia area, not just from the University of Pennsylvania, but from Drexel, from Temple, from Jeff, and all of those talented individuals see the growth and innovation in Philadelphia, and they see opportunities, right, to stay here and to contribute to the exciting things that are happening. And I think that's what's great about this campus is we have companies that, let's say, start in our incubator space, which is the Penn Center. I'll give you the example, Interius Biotherapeutics. They're developing cell therapy to treat cancer, and they're able to now go from the incubator space into their own 17,000 square foot lab space in the main lab building. And so you can see how they're growing their team and they're growing, their business to be able to solve these healthcare challenges, and that's pretty inspiring.
There's the threat that perhaps there's a leak in the balloon of the need for the superstar cities. Fortunately, you guys are betting that it's quite strong and it will endure. I'm glad to hear that those bets are there. That is all our time. This has been another conversation ahead of the Introduce conference. Bhavana and John, thanks so much for it. Thanks for being here.
Chris,
thanks for having us.
Appreciate it. We'll see you guys in person Thursday, May 12th. This is after the fact. That means that you probably can click here and click on other videos from the Introduce conference and explore them all. Deep conversations on building better companies, where and how. We appreciate it. We'll put also links to PCI and other coverage here below. We'll see you next time, guys. Thanks so much.